New year, new reading vlogs. Happy 2022. Like I said in the previous video, in the last one of 2021, I'm setting my reading challenge goal to 10 books for 2022 as well. That's just my minimum goal that I would like to reach, but I'm not gonna like pressure myself with more. Then who knows how it's gonna go. Doesn't really matter. I'm not like here to prove anything. So 10 books I wanna do this year. 2 books I already did technically, though to be fair, one of those was just like a single essay with like 10 pages or something. But in the technicality of things, it does count as a book. It is a text that I read, so it's in there, it counts as one. And yeah, okay, I'm gonna talk about those 2. The 2 first texts that I read and finished in 2022. Do I even have it on here, the first one? Because I did just read it on my phone. So I don't have this on my ebook reader because I only read this on my phone. Probably gonna put a screenshot of it on screen right now. It doesn't even have a cover anyway, because it isn't even like a proper book. The reading stats are also pretty fucking pointless for this one. I've had one of those 3 AM Wikipedia deep dives, rabbit holes, a few weeks ago about shit like the so-called human overpopulation problem and antinatalism and shit. A bunch of philosophical strains of nihilism. Just read a bunch of stuff, and while doing that random Wikipedia reading one night, I stumbled upon this guy called Peter Wessel Zapffe, a European philosopher that wrote a bunch of stuff. He was Norwegian though, and most of his texts were never officially translated, which is a shame because from his Wikipedia page he does seem like an interesting fellow. In his eyes, the humanity suffers from an overdeveloped consciousness that is only giving us grief and pain and suffering. We are so far developed mentally that we are too good at context reading and remembering shit that it makes all our life just recognizing suffering and pain, and so life itself becomes not good for us. That's like his thesis. And like there's a whole strain of philosophy that says that this overdeveloped consciousness makes life not worth living in a way. All of the bad things we experience we have to blame to our way too big brain. And many of them go even so far to say that the only morally right thing to do is to not reproduce, so that we don't have children that have to suffer the same fate of being too conscious of the world's bullshit, you know? Not something I immediately or directly support myself, but I just find it really interesting in a philosophical discussion. This Peter Wessel Zapffe is a lot about that. So I wrote one of his more general essays that actually got a translation from somebody. I think it was not even a professional translation, but more like a very well made translation, but one that was made voluntarily by somebody. I'm really not sure, but it's like freely available as a PDF. But it's just like 10 pages or something, because it's just one essay. The Last Messiah is the title. And it talks about some interesting things, like how, like it talks about how we as a society have developed certain instinctual defense mechanisms against like misery. Shit like how it is a social norm almost these days that we do not talk about our individual grievances. How most objects that we are calling luxury and that make up the high society are things that distract us from life, all because our consciousness are making existence itself so unbearable, in his words, so to say. There's definitely like some truth to some of these things. Obviously it's arguable if the whole situation is really as fatalist or cynical as Zapffe himself makes it out to be, but that's what's interesting about it. I really like these arguments in a philosophical setting about existence itself, this whole existentialism shit, and how our consciousness is a two-sided sword and everything. And Zapfe's little essay here actually is written quite well. It has a certain poetic prose to it in certain parts, which makes it, which prevents it from being just dry philosophical text. And this is not about agreeing, it's just about it being an interesting argument, and I enjoyed reading it. I would really like to read more by Peter Wessel Zapffe, because he seems like an interesting fella. And I really like reading about his pessimistic philosophy, but it's so hard to find proper translations of his work, because that just never, from what I can tell, that there have never really been proper translated publications aside from a few solitary essays, which is a shame, but I like this one. Anyway, that's it. The other actual book that I finished is one that I have talked about in the previous video, Factfulness by Hans Rosling. In the previous video I talked about how I had started to read it, but the subject matter and the heavy focus on data and statistics was a bit too dry and exhausting for me at the time, so I went for fictional texts during the Christmas season. After that, though, I went back to Factfulness to finish it, and although I was a bit skeptical at the beginning, I did end up liking this quite a lot. Now, I'm trying to not repeat myself too much here. Factfulness is a non-fiction book by Hans Rosling, Swedish doctor and statistician. I think that's the word. It attempts to use data and statistics to alleviate the negativity instinct and the cynicism that many of us experience when looking at world news, you know? Fuck. I think all of us have those moments where they watch the daily news or whatever and just feel like everything is getting worse and worse with each day. Shit is just getting terrible. Nothing is getting better, especially like in recent times when we are right now still in the COVID-19 pandemic and all of that shit, where we have that to worry about as well, just aside from the usual shit as like climate change or gender equality and racial injustice, whatever. All of that shit all going on. And it's hard to not lose your head and hopefulness in the time of quick information that's always available. And this book is attempting to show the reader that the world isn't quite as bad as we all seem to think it is, supporting that with statistics and data, and putting a big focus on how to consume information in a way that doesn't fucking kill our brains. You know, it talks about like the obvious things, like how journalism is skewed to a negative side because you don't hear or see about the positive small things in the world. Journalism at the news is mostly focused on sensationalist tragedies because that's just how media works. So consuming the news daily or whatever obviously is gonna give us a negative worldview because it is just a collection of the bad shit for the most part. How to avoid misreading data, asking for context to actually understand the numbers or whatever, avoiding mindsets like we and them, stupid shit like that, or getting stuck in stereotypes, getting stuck in outdated mindsets in general, giving a lot of tips of how to not lose our cool so that we can more productively work on progress and bettering these problems that do exist, but we don't have an up-to-date point of view on for the most part because we are so overwhelmed by information. That's the whole. I was skeptical at the beginning because I was afraid that this might become some dude just rearranging numbers and labels to make real world problems just not seem as big as they really are, or do like the whole facts don't care about your feelings shtick that seems to be popular these days. But that's the author Hans Rosling does actually like acknowledge that, like, and there are multiple moments in this book where he says everything we are talking about here is still a serious subject and it absolutely is worth being concerned about. These are still problems that can still become better or solved, and what he is just trying to do is make sure you are up to date on it and not like stuck in cynic or outdated views on these problems. Like, that's something that he says himself, that he writes himself. It is important to remember that it can both be bad and better at the same time, saying that it can still be a problem, but you have to acknowledge the progress that has been done in the past to not lose your own hope. If you're just gonna think it has always been shit, why is this not solved yet, you're stuck in a sort of fatalistic mindset that is not going to help actually progressing the problem. So it is important to acknowledge that there has been progress in the past, that whatever you're worried about has most likely been worse in the previous 50 or 100 years. And we are going up, we are not going down. That's the thing that he is trying to make clear with this book, without ever trivializing the problems at hand. Besides all of this focus on statistics and data and numbers and whatever, and facts, graphs, all of that shit, there's still a lot of humanity in this book, a lot of personal stories of his, which I really appreciated because they help so much making this a more comfortable read and not as dry as it could have been. Rosling is a doctor that traveled the world, doing a lot of fucking interesting shit, working on diseases or studying them with many different people and cultures, has a lot of interesting stories to tell from his own life that work well in his general book here, making good points. Every chapter in this book is based on a potential negative instinct that we have when confronted with information or news or whatever, with the world. And it backs that up with a certain statistic about a subject that we are most likely familiar with, and spruces that up with his personal stories as well to bring more color to it, and it flows pretty damn well. Aside from, there are one or two things, two little moments or details in his arguments where I'm not entirely on the same page with him, but for the most part, 95% of the way, I guess, I get this guy, I'm with this guy, appreciate and acknowledge how genuine he is, because he wrote, this is the last book that he wrote in his life. He died before this book was published. He still wrote and edited this text while on his deathbed, literally, from what I can gather. This was something this guy was actually passionate about, and I really respect that, and I believe it. It seems very genuine. And this good handful of humanity is doing this book of data and statistics and worldviews a hell of a good. And of course, it is not a 100% anxiety relief or whatever, but it is informative, and it is charming, I would say. Alright, let's have this one here. Squunched up Nicolas Cage in the corner of the video to make this heavy theme of this book a little bit lighter. So I haven't been having a great day today. Bit of a bad brain day, and because of that I picked up a book about suicide. That's a terrible fucking intro. No, that's not really it. Sometimes a good way to deal with a bad brain day is to indulge into the feeling or thoughts through some media in hopes of some emotional catharsis. Anyway, I decided to reread Suicide by Édouard Levé. It's a French author, a French novel, and I have the German translation. I've read this before in 2018, 4 years ago. I was planning to reread this at some point anyway, because when I read it the first time back in 2018, I didn't really come out of it with a lot of lasting thoughts. I didn't really know what to take from this when I read it the first time, even though there's a lot about its existence that's super interesting. So I really felt like a second chance would be completely worth it. Also, it's just 110 pages long. It's a really quick read, even despite the heavy theme, the heavy subject. I read this in pretty much one go, 2 hours 40 minutes, I think it is. It didn't bring me down or anything. It didn't do that part of like, it didn't bring the catharsis, the emotional catharsis that I was partially hoping for. But that's a whole different thing. That's not what I'm gonna judge this book on, because that's not even the intention, I don't think. It is weird. This is Édouard Levé's Suicide. But that's a weird phrase to say when the author, Édouard Levé, did actually die of suicide. A mere few days after finishing the script for this book. Like, that's the actual true story. The guy sent the final version of the script to his publisher. The publisher loved the text. The publisher called the dude to make an appointment to like discuss the publishing deal or whatever over a dinner or something, which they agreed to. But before that appointment could actually happen, Édouard Levé committed suicide. So there's a lot of layers to this that spread out even outside of the fiction, like into the real life. The story is that a man kills himself. A man commits suicide with a gun right in the beginning of the book, and the narrator is apparently was apparently a close friend of the suicide victim, and is just reminiscing over their relationship, pretty much, remembering the person that is no longer there. But it's written in the second form singular, so everything starts with you. The book is literally talking to the reader in a way. it's like a letter to the fictional character that committed suicide, but it's a unique way to write a novel at all. But it's even weirder when it's about a fucking suicide victim. But it's an interesting stylistic choice, in my opinion. You committed suicide. You ended your life. Why did you do it? I remember when you did this, and this. And that's the whole book, you know? So that's an interesting thing that I actually appreciate about the book. It's also intentionally written in a pretty structureless way. It is written like the fleeting thoughts of a human being. It's a string of thoughts, the entire book. It is literally just this character reminiscing about this suicide victim, about his life in random ways. Like a random anecdote here, followed by a travel story, followed by a short paragraph about the nature of depression itself, followed by how they first met or whatever. There's no chronological linearity or like dramatic thread or something. It's just thoughts. There are hints, I guess, at trying to find out the reason why the person committed suicide. It's never actually the focus. Very early on, it's even described that the suicide victim left open a comic book on the table, an open comic book that the wife, upon finding the dead body, accidentally throws off the table, and it is believed by some family members that the suicide victim, who we never know the name of, I don't think. I just realized that I don't think there's a single mention of the name. So people think that the open comic book was intentionally placed there as a suicide note, maybe explaining the suicide, but since the wife, in the panic and shock of finding her dead husband, kicked the comic book off the table, and they don't know which page was opened, there's no way in finding out if that's actually true, if that was actually intended to be a suicide note or whatever. Could be nothing, but it's not like it's just alluded to in a sentence or two near the beginning maybe, but it's never the focus. Neither is like the entire reminiscing about the character is never actually about trying to deduce why or what might have led him into suicide. It is pure neutral reminiscing about his life, pretty much. And at the beginning I thought that the intention of this book, or one of its goals, would be to show how, I don't know, suicide doesn't need to have a tangible reason, or that suicide can hide in the most conventional, normal person, something like that. Some of the early ways of writing and introducing the character made me think that that might be the focus of this text, and that would have been a solid intention. It would be an interesting subject to explore in this way, but it's never actually the thing. It has interesting moments. It even has some passages of text that put depression, suicidal tendencies in a pretty well phrased way, in an interesting prose, sometimes even a bit poetic. But most of the book seems to be rather aimless tangents of random memories with the person, which has a certain charm to itself, exploring this life of a person that you have never met through a close friend after the life has ended. there's something interesting there, and I do enjoy and did enjoy reading it from that point of view to a certain degree, but it was always missing the point in a way. Like, I feel like there is a point. I feel like there was an intention. I feel like this isn't a random collection of words, but I cannot really grasp what exactly this text is trying to do. You know what I mean? And that's kinda disappointing in a way, and stopping me from fully appreciating this book, I think, because, like I said earlier, there are very interesting elements in the concept of this book itself, make it interesting from the outside looking in, I guess. It's difficult for me to reach a solid stance towards this book. This book is fictional, but many interpretations of people lead to this possibly being a partially autobiographical thing, or even the suicide note of the author himself in novel form. The Wikipedia page mentions at one point that somebody in a literary magazine mentions that this book could be alluding to the actual real-life suicide of a friend of the author that happened 20 years prior or something, but I don't have any more information about that. This could be completely purely fictional. This could be partially about the author himself. This could be about the author's friend that died of suicide, or it could be an amalgamation of all of it. Either way, there are many strings that lead to this being a very personal and sincere book, which makes me even more confused or conflicted about the book not being that effective for me. But I'm missing the depth. I think that's it. I'm missing the depth in this very clearly, very personal and genuine text. You know, that I feel like I'm missing something. But yeah, it's still good. It's still more interesting than not, and I would still recommend this to people who are interested in this book or in literary fiction about suicide and depression in general, on the chance that they will get more out of this than I did, because clearly many people did get more out of this than I did. So I think this is worth a shot, especially since it's so short and easy to read. Anyway, that's Édouard Levé's suicide. Rest in peace, Édouard Levé. I think there's a good chance that I'm gonna read Auto Portrait, Édouard Levé's other book. I think there's a good chance that I'm gonna read that sometime this year as well. So a few days ago I rewatched Blade Runner, and then for the first time watched Blade Runner 2049. This is the late sequel, which I both liked. This Blade Runner 2049 especially, I actually love that one, because that made me more interested in the world of Blade Runner. I was then interested in reading the original book that it was based on, which is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. Storygraph, the website I use mostly for my book logging. Like, it's an alternative to Goodreads that isn't attached to Amazon, and it's more modern, more fresh, more new, more active in the development. Storygraph has rolled out a new feature in the last few months somewhere called a buddy read, which lets you organize reading a book together with somebody or with a group, like a book club thing. It creates a page for you and your friends or whatever to read the book together and then comment on where you're at reading the book. Doing it all in a way that you can only read the comments others made when you yourself reached that part of the book, so not to spoil anything. It's very simple, but it works. It's a fun way to read with others. So me and a friend, Uwe, we tried that out for Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and it looks like this, very simple. The progress of each participant, and then all the comments, which are each linked to a certain percentage in the book. And we read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and it was very good. It was, it was one of the best books I've read in a while, really. Like, I didn't even expect it to, I didn't expect myself to enjoy this much, but it was fantastic. If you've never seen Blade Runner or whatever, it's set in a dystopian future where the protagonist works as a bounty hunter to capture and destroy rogue androids that look just like people. Androids created pretty much as artificial slaves, but they are so advanced that it's very hard to discern them from real people in this world. And so they have these professional bounty hunters that test them, that find them, that test them, and then destroy them if they are actually androids. That's the overall gist of the story. It is not surprising to me at all that the book is held as this classic, because it creates a world that feels very coherent and colorful in its futuristic technology, in a way even that you wouldn't tell that this book was written in the 60s. Like, I couldn't tell. I knew that the book was written in the 60s, but I wouldn't have been able to tell just from reading it. And there are a lot of futuristic ideas technology wise in there. There's a lot of interesting and unique stuff in there, and it uses that setting incredibly well to explore subjects like empathy and the meaning of humanity as a whole, artificial life, obviously, I guess, just existentialism in itself, in a way. And all of that very organically from multiple different points of view, pretty much. And that all wrapped in an actually engaging and thrilling story about this bounty hunter doing his job, as well as another character. What I didn't even know, the electric sheep in the title isn't metaphorical. It's an actual thing. There is an actual electric sheep. That was kind of funny to find out, and it's all part of the fact that in this dystopian future, real animals are incredibly rare due to mass extinction, and everybody wants a real, genuine animal as a pet, because that's like a privilege to have. You don't buy an expensive car in this world. You buy an actual creature, a pet, an animal to take care of. And these go for like enormous prices because they are so rare. Even bugs or spiders go for hundreds of whatever. And there's an electric sheep because people that cannot afford an actual animal, they go for the cheaper alternative of fake and electronic animals. That's why there's an electric sheep. It's a funny thing. And out of all the animals they could have included, there's one short moment in an early chapter where the protagonist sees a raccoon, a genuine, actual living raccoon, not a mechanical, not an electric one, and its name is fucking called Bill the raccoon, and it blows the protagonist's mind. It's not plot relevant at all, but that was the funniest shit ever. They genuinely were just moments in the story that actually had me glued to the page and I really wanted to keep on reading and finding out what that is, which I don't even have with the most interesting books most of the time. I read the second half of the book in one go because I was so entertained and engaged by it. And that all the while it has actually genuine philosophical examinations of things all baked into it. Like, it works both as entertainment and as something more with another layer in there. I really don't have anything major to complain. The only things, like in the beginning I was a bit lost during the first chapter or two because they throw a lot of world building at you with a lot of wild ideas about this future. But like, as soon as the characters are set in place and the exposition is done and you know where they are going, it's a very fluent and easy to follow story. And then at the end, very close to the end, there's a little bit of a tangent with the protagonist going down a specific spiritual line of thought that I couldn't really follow much, that didn't do much for me, but still wasn't like something I would complain about. It was just a lot of fun. I would absolutely understand why it's a beloved classic, and I absolutely would recommend this to anyone interested, for fucking sure. That's the last major read that I did in the month of January. So this ebook reader here, that is all dusty and grimy and old and chunky and actually surprisingly heavy for how small it is. This pocketbook, which is, I guess, pocketbook 622 or whatever, it's literally 10 years old. I got this as a hand-me-down from my dad like 6-7 years ago or something. It's a very, very outdated model. It's slow. The software is outdated and just works in the most basic way. All the fancy features that require some sort of online elements don't really work anymore that well, or are just convoluted and annoying. My PC never recognized the thing when I plugged it in, so the only way for me to actually get ebooks on the reader was to email them to a service account, and that's annoying and slow and can't even do big PDF files and shit. It's just, it works in the most basic way, but I've been meaning to upgrade to something actually up to date and modern for a long time. A few days ago, I found a killer fucking deal from a private guy in a neighboring city that was trying to get rid of their brand new, still shrink wrapped ebook reader, Ebook Device. They already had one or whatever. They offered it for a third of its original price, and it was coincidentally one of the ebook devices that I had picked out as one of my top priorities to look for. So I messaged them, and yesterday, because they didn't want to send it, I don't know why, they were one of those people that just wanted it to be taken from them. Literally going there, giving them cash money and take it, like one of those things. So yesterday I went on a little train ride adventure to that neighboring city and met the dude. And now I have this brand new one. And I'm sure it looks like the same thing that I just showed you before, but I swear to God it's a different one. Old, 10 years old. Oh boy. New from 2020? I believe. It's definitely not older than 2 years, and I just got it out of the packaging yesterday. It's the same brand, Pocketbook. That's completely fine with me. It's basically the same fucking layout, which is completely fine with me. The screen is the same size, but the device itself is a little bit smaller and lighter and thinner. I like that. All the software on it is fresh, quick, snappy, has a lot of features. It has a backlight. Oh my god, that's so fucking nice. And I can just put ebooks. I can drag and drop them on my PC to a cloud, and then they are automatically downloaded on the device. It's so nice. It's the most basic thing, but it's so nice. So yeah, I'm super happy to finally have a brand new, modern, actually up-to-date ebook device, and it's so much nicer to read with it now. And on my way to the dude to get that thing, that ebook device, I stumbled upon one of those public bookshelves. You can just put your books that you don't wanna read anymore in there for other people to grab, or just take out whatever's interesting for you yourself. And there wasn't like anything really that interesting in there, especially nothing that I couldn't just get as an ebook. But there was one book in there that like I was curious and looked at it. It's a very short picture book. Like it's not even really something to read, it's just a novelty book to look at for a few minutes. And I just read it standing next to that public bookshelf in like 10 minutes and put it back in. But I guess technically I read the book. Stop Looking at Your Phone by Son of Alan. I don't know who Son of Alan is. I don't know what that means. It's a novelty picture book giving you instructions to not look at your phone as much because you're missing the real world, like that whole deal. And you have to definitely take it with a grain of salt to take any enjoyment out of it, because otherwise it's just gonna be preachy and reductive. And it's not even that funny. I'm pretty sure it's trying to be funny, and like 1 or 2 pages got a little bit of a giggle from me, I guess, but it's not very interesting or funny. It's honestly pretty old. It's a pretty old joke, and as a so-called self-help book, it's very, like, if you actually have a phone addiction or whatever, or want to get away a bit from that sort of technology, this book is not gonna help you. The only way to get anything out of this is if you're going into it looking for a quick 10-minute entertainment thing from some dumb pictures. But even that, it's not great. I don't seem to be the only one either. Like that, this book is just not well regarded anyway. It's just a novelty fucking joke thing or whatever. But that is it, I guess. That is it. On the cold numbers, I read 5 out of 10 books of my yearly goal, but of course I am acknowledging that at least 2 of those are barely books. One is like a 10-page essay thing, and the other was just a picture book, right? So whatever. But that's where I am at already, I guess. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I realized that Storygraph has a whole reading challenges page, which I saw it before, but I honestly kind of just thought it would be only the yearly reading challenge. But I learned this month that this reading challenge page is actually for all sorts of reading challenges that people made up themselves or that you want to make up, just for fun, like trying to complete these challenges. And I decided to join one of them that my friend Uwe is also doing, and it's called the Taste of Each Genre Challenge, created by High on Books, the user High on Books. It's 14 categories, each one is a certain book genre, and I'm just trying to do that just for fun. I mean, it's cool to have like this extra incentive to read different kinds of genres, to read different kinds of books, just to have another reason to get more variety in there. I'm gonna do this one. I already like roughly put ideas into each category that I might be reading for them, though I might just change them out. They are not binding. Otherwise, still making my way through Afghanistan. It is actually super interesting right now. I'm currently in the chapters that deal with the first Anglo-Afghan conflicts. Up until this point, it was mostly all about conflicts and cultures and politics inside of Afghanistan itself. Now we're getting more into the international things, though we're still in the 19th century, so it's still not the stupid fucking US bullshit, you know? Interesting Afghan rulers actually made me interested in even checking out the Wikipedia page and seeing if there are more books about them that I might be reading in the future. Like, it's actually interesting. It's still somewhat exhausting to read because it's just so much information packed in so little text. Or like, it's a lot of text actually, and there's a lot of information to digest. So I'm getting through this still very, very slowly. But I am in it right now. And that's January.